Loki, you are charged with escaping from your timeline. How do you plead?
A god doesn't plead.
Now, hang on just a minute.
Our timeline is in chaos. We need Loki.
Trusting this man is not a good idea.
You cross me, there are deadly consequences.
Go for it.
Do I get a weapon? Gear up. Don't those feel good?
Absolutely not.
Now streaming only on Disney+.
Welcome back, everyone. This is going to be my Marvel Loki Episode 1 early review video. There's so much stuff going on in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I feel like Loki is probably going to wind up being everyone's favorite series so far. I will be doing videos for all the episodes, so be sure to subscribe to get everything if you're brand new to the channel, and we're doing a giveaway for Disney Plus memberships. All you have to do to enter that is just be a subscriber and let me know what you're most excited to see on Loki. I will compare Loki with Wandavision and Falcon and Winter Soldier because this is the third Marvel Disney Plus series that we've gotten so far, and it is very different from the way they made Wandavision and Falcon and Winter Soldier. The characters obviously very different, the stuff that they're playing in is very different, but in the way that they use WandaVision to sort of set up a couple other Marvel movies and change some really fundamental things about the MCU, they're doing the same thing with the Loki series, but I'll explain why I think that Loki is doing a better job at that than the other series did so far. And also sort of playing into the idea that people will be a little more satisfied with what they did with the Loki episodes. But it should come as no surprise to anyone that Tom Hiddleston is fantastic as all these alternate versions of Loki. So obviously we saw Loki's story through the MCU in the Marvel movies so far up through Avengers Infinity War, where he truly achieved redemption, became a good character, sacrificed himself, and then was killed by Thanos. We pick up with this version of Loki, the variant, in Avengers Endgame. So they kind of treat him like the trash version of Loki when they first haul him in because he's not supposed to exist, technically. But because a lot of the series is inspired by stuff like Blade Runner, Rick and Morty, you have the TVA recruiting him to go after all these other alternate Lokis because someone that they can't track down is altering the timeline in a fundamental way. But when we talk about the series affecting the plot of the rest of the MCU, pushing forward into Marvel Phase 4, one of the ways they do that in the Loki series is that this mystery villain that they're going after, the reason why they recruit this variant Loki to take them down, is because this mystery villain is changing the entire timeline for all the Marvel characters. So you're talking about all the big A-list Avengers characters like Thor, we're going to see in Thor Love and Thunder pretty soon, for Doctor Strange, for Scarlet Witch. So even though you have Scarlet Witch in WandaVision doing all these crazy things, heading into Doctor Strange 2 Multiverse of Madness, causing even more problems in the multiverse, on a much bigger level, you have the Loki series affecting everything as it's happening before it's happened, because we're talking about affecting stuff that's happening in the future as well. So in the way that Avengers Endgame had that time travel plot where they go back and you revisit moments from earlier Marvel movies, the Loki series does that as well. And just like during Avengers Endgame, they used those different storylines like the Thor plot to make Thor the Dark World seem like a better movie in retrospect. Like you go back and you watch Thor the Dark World now after watching all his scenes with his mother in Asgard, and it seems like a much better movie. The Loki series does the exact same thing, making some of the earlier, especially Marvel Phase 1 movies, seem even better. And obviously because we're talking about Loki, they play mostly on the Thor movies, but also on the Avengers movies as well, because he's a big Avengers character. So when we're talking about scope, like you're looking for a really big story, this is a much bigger story, has potential to be a much bigger story than WandaVision did. Even though there was a lot of hype going into WandaVision early about what's going on with the multiverse during this, and you have the whole Evan Peters Quicksilver of it all. The Loki series does things like that, but I think it just does a much better job of paying those beats off. Like, don't freak out worrying about any kind of Ralph Bohner type of twist on Loki. But just in terms of big characters that it's playing with, I know I talked about this mystery villain is fundamentally altering the MCU timeline, and they don't know who it is, and they don't know how to stop them, and that's why they're recruiting Loki. Even though we obviously have not seen the finale of Loki yet, early theory, I think, is pretty easy to assume that it's not going to wind up being Kang the Conqueror, even though the series is playing in a lot of Easter eggs for Doctor Strange 2 Multiverse of Madness, because it is Marvel's first legit multiverse series, even though they kind of teased that on WandaVision. Loki actually does get into legit multiverse during episode 1, so it will help set up the plot of Doctor Strange 2 Multiverse of Madness with some crossover. It'll also lead into Ant-Man 3 Quantumania a little bit, and there is a lot of Kang the Conqueror Easter eggs in the background. But I think the only real role that he's going to play in the series is that it's playing in a lot of stories that he is heavily involved in and will foreshadow a lot of what he's doing when he does finally show up during Ant-Man 3. But aside from potential big post-credit scenes in future Marvel movies, I'm not expecting to see a lot of Kang the Conqueror during this series. So when you're talking about who's this big villain who's behind all these big twists. Think more about characters that you'll actually see show up during the Loki series, like the other alternate versions of Loki. The fundamental arc that Loki is on during the series, though, is one of self-acceptance. Like the whole idea in the MCU through his redemption, through the Thor movies like Thor Ragnarok, by the time we get to Avengers Infinity War, he finally accepts who he is. He calls himself an Odin's son. That's kind of what they're doing with the Loki series. So as he goes around dealing with all these other variants, kind of like Deckard goes around during Blade Runner trying to take down the replicants, Loki winds up learning more about himself, and by the finale finally winds up accepting who he is. But just in general, the first episode does a lot of what you would expect it to do. It sort of serves as an intro for the Loki character again, like, if you missed it previously on. The big recap that you see when a new season of a big serialized series starts, like, if you missed the last 20 episodes in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, these other movies, this is what just happened. They even kind of work that into the plot of the episode too. Owen Wilson's Mobius character hauls him into the time theater and sort of shows him the major events of his life. It's sort of like a Marvel recap of all the big Marvel movies. Like, these are all the terrible things that you've done or that you will do. I know there are a lot of questions about how the Time Variance Authority figures into the events of the previous Marvel movies. Like, if they've been here sitting at the end of time or sort of outside the normal events of space-time, they're sort of in like a pocket dimension outside of normal space-time, why are they just making themselves known now? They answer a lot of those questions during the first couple of episodes. The showrunner came from Rick and Morty, so he said that he was used to people asking a lot of these really minutiae questions. Like, he was anticipating people trying to poke holes in a lot of the way that they use time travel, for instance. So in the way that they make the plots of a lot of the earlier Marvel movies seem better in retrospect with the way they joke on them and reference them during episodes, they also make time travel seem a lot better in the MCU, the way they explain things. Even though we haven't seen all the episodes yet, the showrunner did say that they were allowed to go for whatever cameos they wanted, so there are way more cameos during the Loki series than there were during previous series. So just keep an eye out for that, but just remember that we're talking about Loki here, and they're mostly dealing with a lot of what happened during the Thor movies, his storyline, which is mostly specific to Thor, and some of the Avengers movies. We've already seen him reference Chris Hemsworth's Thor Heimdall in the previous trailers already, so just use that to calibrate your expectations. But if you didn't see some of my other Loki videos, I did talk about the way the series is going to handle Chris Hemsworth's Thor. Just because most of the time when you've seen Loki in the previous Marvel movies, he's either in a Thor movie or he's with Thor or fighting Thor in some way. So Thor has just always been around when Loki has been around. In one of the pitches for this series, when they came into it, when they were pitching Tom Hiddleston on it initially, is that they were asking the question, what is going on with Loki when Thor is not around all the time? Really good example of that sort of plays into the idea of what happens during episode 1. At the end of the first Thor movie, Loki seemingly sacrifices himself and he kind of gives up and just lets himself be drawn into that wormhole, like the black hole, as he's sucked into another place. And you just don't know what happens to him until he shows up in the first Avengers movie. Very similar to what you see happen to Loki during Avengers Endgame, where he takes the Tesseract, portals away, and you kind of don't know what happens to him until you pick up in the Loki series. So imagine after the first Thor movie, if you had actually gotten a Loki series where you see what happens to Loki the minute he gets sucked through that black hole. Like, you see him go and eventually meet Thanos, make the bargain with him. But as I said, Tom Hiddleston is fantastic as all these disparate versions of Loki. Like, he's playing many different versions of his character because you have all these other variants, but also the idea that some of the alternate Lokis will be played by different actors. Owen Wilson was also fantastic as the Mobius character. He's sort of written to be the Deckard character in Blade Runner, the sort of hard-boiled detective that's trying to solve this mystery about who it is, which alternate version of Loki is fundamentally altering the timeline in a way that they can't track. Gugu Mbatha-Raw is fantastic as her Ravonna Renslayer character. Obviously a big Kang the Conqueror character from the comics. Fantastic Four and the Thor comics as well. So I'll talk about those Easter eggs when I do the full episode videos. You might recognize Wumi Masako from some other series. She's playing this main hunter that you see in all the trailers, the one that's basically giving Loki the business all the time. The funny reference I'll make here is if you remember that TV show Night Court, because the TVA kind of is like a version of Time Night Court, she's kind of like the Roz character, like the one that you don't want to mess with. The bailiff will just wreck you if you look at them the wrong way. Just in general, I feel like they did a really good job with casting the series. And I'll talk more about some of the other actors, like these other alternate versions of Loki played by different actors when they do show up in episodes. But sort of comparing this to WandaVision, Falcon and Winter Soldier, because this is the third Marvel Disney Plus series that we've gotten so far. But whereas WandaVision was another series that got super crazy, like Loki is getting super crazy, played with perspective, at least for the first several episodes, you're meant to question Scarlet Witch's sanity, what's real, what's fake, what's she creating on the fly, who's the real villain here. The issue that I think a lot of people came away from WandaVision with is that because of the way the pandemic last year just shut everything down, they had to stop filming in the middle for a long time. They weren't able to get all the actors back that they wanted for reshoots when it came time to film the finale. So there was all these great ideas and deleted scenes that you hear about from WandaVision, concepts that they tried to do, but for a number of different reasons just weren't able to get those in the final episodes. So you wind up with all this hype building through the first half of the series, and you don't really get the payoff on WandaVision that you were expecting in the finale. The same thing also kind of happened with the making of Falcon and Winter Soldier. You probably heard about the whole deleted subplot that they had to get rid of during lockdown last year. They were originally supposed to air those episodes before WandaVision, and as a result of all the big ideas and storylines they had to get rid of and just the way they had to cobble the series together, it just didn't feel like it was nearly as cool as it could have been. The difference with the Loki series, the really good thing about the Loki series, is that it feels like the first Marvel Disney Plus series that was not dramatically affected by the pandemic. Like all the ideas that they wanted to try made it into the actual episodes. I feel like the Loki series is probably going to wind up being most people's favorite series so far just because of the tropes that it plays in. Like I give WandaVision major points for how it was able to pull off all the different sitcom tropes, and a lot of those episodes and parodies were very nostalgic, but I was never a huge Nick at Night fan, and I did watch a little bit of Full House when I was a kid, and it was hilarious watching Scarlet Witch and Vision do all the Marvel Universe episodes through that lens. But it wasn't quite as rewarding as, say, watching Loki go full Doctor Who, Rick and Morty, Blade Runner, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Like if you give me a choice of which kind of episode I'd want to see, which genre I'd want to see them do, I'd pick sci-fi over sitcoms every single time. So just in general, even if you're only a small fan of the Thor movies or the Loki character, I think you're probably going to wind up digging the Loki series way more than the other Marvel Disney Plus series so far. Even though they did do a lot of really good things on WandaVision, Falcon, and Winter Soldier. Just as a whole, it feels like Loki is going to wind up being the better series. I know everyone has like 1,000 questions. My full episode 1 Easter egg video is going to post on Wednesday morning, so make sure you have alerts enabled for my channel so you don't miss that. The episodes are about as long as the Falcon and Winter Soldier episodes. There is a bunch of other Marvel stuff that's happening this summer, so I'll talk about that in separate videos. There's a whole bunch of new Black Widow footage that just released, so I'll try to do that video next. I'll name a new giveaway winner when I post that video. Everyone click here for my brand new Thor 4 Love and Thunder first look breakdown, and click here for all my other Loki videos. Thank you so much for watching, everyone stay safe, and I'll see you guys tonight.